artist, Thomas Hart Benton, Edward Hopper, or Grant Wood. All of these artists became famous because they painted scenes of America during the 1930s, just before World War II. If you look closely at their work, comparing their styles, techniques of painting, and subject matter, you will learn how to identify the work of each artist. The 1930s, when Benton, Hopper, and Wood were doing their best work of painting pictures of American life, were dismal times for people caught in the lean years of the Great Depression. These American artists glorified their country cities, rural landscape, and the legends and history of the United States of America. Born in Missouri near the end of the 19th century, Thomas Hart Benton grew up in a family deeply involved in politics, but young Benton didn't want a political career. He chose to go to New York and then to Europe to study art before he returned to the Midwest, where he did his best work. Benton created many large murals for public buildings, as well as smaller easel pictures. He liked to paint scenes from local history and the stories and places he remembered from his childhood. These paintings are by Edward Hopper, an artist who lived and worked in New York and New England. Although he was among many young artists who traveled to Europe to study, he decided that American subjects were what he wanted to paint, and he abandoned the styles and techniques he learned about in Europe. Hopper painted realistically, but most of all, he wanted his pictures to reflect his feeling about his subjects, a sense of loneliness and separation. Grant Wood used a completely new style with his American subject matter, showing local people and places he knew well, the landscapes and life of Iowa. His work shows this love of nature and his fascination with architecture, as well as his interest in American folklore. So, all three of these artists went to Europe to study the art of the old masters and also the new modernism that was in fashion there at the time. But all of them returned to the United States, determined to paint American subjects in a realistic American way. In that, they were all alike, but their individual styles were quite different, as you will see. Now we will look more closely at the work of each of these artists. This is a portrait that Thomas Hart Benton made of himself near the end of his life. You can see that he tried to paint exactly what he saw, even if it was not flattering. He firmly believed that the American people deserved an art that was all their own, so he painted American city dwellers, farmers, factory workers, and the places where they lived and worked in a strong, recognizable manner. Thomas Hart Benton was born in Missouri in 1889. At age 18, he enrolled at the Art Institute of Chicago to pursue further art study, then went to Paris to learn the traditional concepts of European art. After a term in the Navy, he taught in New York City at the Art Students League, then at the Kansas City Art Institute. From 1941 until his death at age 86, when he collapsed sitting at his easel, he was very productive and his work acclaimed and financially rewarding. Here is Boomtown, an early work by Thomas Hart Benton. He was often thought of as a writer who used paint, brush, and canvas to tell a story. This painting shows a town that has sprung up to serve the needs of the people who are working in the oil fields nearby. We feel as though we're on the roof of one of the buildings, looking out on the street full of cars and people and the oil derricks beyond. A solid column of smoke from an uncapped well billows into the sky. The clear near to far perspective, the figures in action, and contrasts of light and dark help us recognize the work of Thomas Hart Benton. Cutting sugar cane and hauling it to the press where it would become molasses and finally sugar was a hot, strenuous job. Thomas Hart Benton has shown in this painting called Sugar Cane how the workers slash a bunch of canes and trim and bundle them. Notice the textures in the foreground and the flowing movement of the sugarcane tops where they fall into the ground. Benton used the element of value in this painting and the principle of contrasts, particularly the darkest dark against the lightest light, to create a good composition. As you can see, Benton was very straightforward and realistic in his pictorial rendering of a subject. This is the very last painting that Thomas Hart Benton did in his life. It hangs in a place that is regarded as the center of American country music in Nashville, Tennessee. What instruments can you see? Notice how the artist has arranged small groups of people to form the composition. Consider the colors, the busy people, the rhythms created by the way the many figures are placed around each other. Again, we can see how the artist painted a story about American folklore. Thomas Hart Benton's paintings satisfied the taste of ordinary Americans who did not know much about art, but loved to look at things that they could understand. The painting showed familiar subjects in realistic compositions, bustling with life and energy. This is a self-portrait by Edward Hopper.